Hello, and welcome to the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast, the podcast redefining women's health, one unfiltered conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jacqueline Rose, and every week I'll sit down with leading women's health experts and real women to share their lived experiences, bust health myths, challenge outdated and uninformed narratives, and explore what's really possible for women. We'll talk about periods, fertility, menopause, hormones, aging, and everything in between. This podcast is for every woman who ever felt confused, dismissed, or left out of the conversation about her own health. It is a space to celebrate women, break the silence, and open up conversations between mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. Please hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode and share this podcast with your daughters, family, and friends. Let's get on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. I am very excited to welcome our guest today. We're going to be talking about some really interesting and important topics that relate to midlife women, things you may be hearing out on social media, things you may have heard on other podcasts about how to navigate this time of life when it comes to important topics like strength training, nutrition, protein. We're going to dive into all of these issues with our guest today, Terry. Hello, welcome. I'm so happy that you're joining us. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll jump straight in.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for having me. So I am a strength and nutrition coach for women over 40 who are entering perimenopause, menopause. I also run yoga retreats in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee in person. I train people in person. We do a lot of yoga, meditation, hikes, things like that. I'm also just launched a cookbook, which is on my website, thehouseofrose.com. So you can find all the information there.
Amazing. So we have a lot of crossover because you also work with midlife women and you do your yoga retreats. I come from a yoga background. I entered into this women's health space through the world of yoga, trained in a lot of different trainings and modalities. So I know we are connected in many different ways. But tell me a little bit about how you started in this space and your journey to really focusing on this whole concept, which we're really going to delve into, of strength training, increasing your protein intake, sort of changing things up in midlife, which we're sort of beginning to hear that things that worked before don't work now. Women know this, they see this, they feel this, but then what has to change and why? So maybe start off with sort of how you came to this, and then we'll sort of go further into the conversation.
Jacqueline, when I tell you guys and to everybody listening how I actually got into this, you will not believe it because I don't believe it. So I started out my career as a software engineer. I worked in computer science for a long time. I eventually went on to start my own digital agency and did that for clients. And so that's what I did. I was an engineer. And if somebody had told me 10 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would think that they're crazy because there was no way that I believed life would take me on this path. So I was just minding my own business. Okay. I had my own business. I had two children. The first one my daughter I had at 30, my son I had at 35. And slowly but surely, I was becoming more and more stressed out, overwhelmed, just generally unwell. I was gaining weight consistently. I was yo-yo dieting, and every time I'd yo-yo diet, I'd gain even more than what I'd lost. And by the time I was 37, 2 years postpartum, I was still wearing maternity clothes, and I was hopeless. I didn't know what to do because nothing I did at that point was working. Now, the interesting twist to the story here is that unbeknownst to me at 37, I had entered perimenopause and I didn't know that.
Right.
And just
And it was probably not in your even in your lexicon, because you've got a toddler at home, you've got two toddlers at home. And this whole concept, and it doesn't matter whether you're 37 or 42, this concept of having toddlers and being in perimenopause, they really don't mesh together.
No, and it really literally, like you said, it was so far out of my mind zone
Yeah.
that I didn't even think twice about it. And so at 37, so just for a reference point, I am going to be 50 this year. So that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
The landscape of social media, the landscape on podcast, information on menopause, information on women's health, just understanding what strength training is, understanding what dieting does to the body, especially as you enter perimenopause, was
Yeah.
just not as available, right? So my story really begins in seeking and searching out every single diet book I could get my hands on. So I became a professional dieter at
Yeah.
37. I tried Atkins, South Beach, keto, fruitarian, carnivore. I did them all. Okay. And they
Yeah.
all worked really well for about 6 months. I white knuckled it. It worked really well. I would drop 30, 40 pounds. And then I'd go right back to normal, quote, right?
Yeah.
My normal existence. And I would gain all the way back plus some.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just kept doing that. And eventually I came to the conclusion that diets do not work. They did not
Yeah.
work for me. I came up with a story like, it seems to work for everybody else. Like everybody else is successful. Meanwhile, that's not true.
Yes.
And I am the only one that keeps failing this, right? So I have to come up with my own diet plan that
Yeah.
is going to work for me. And I have to do this my way. And so I bought a Peloton. So 13 years ago was actually when the first iteration of Peloton had come out. I still have that bike, the first iteration, first generation Peloton. I decided that I needed to eat all day long rather than starving myself and being hungry.
Yeah.
I decided that I'm going to eat a very high volume meal, right? And I would eat that the whole day. So I would make a different flavor type of salad every single day in this huge wooden bowl that was made for like 20 people.
Right.
And I had, feta cheese, avocados, apples, lettuce, all the things right in there.
Right.
And I would eat that all day. So I'd technically be chewing all day long and I would ride my bike. And I was successful at dropping 30 pounds doing that. Now, for reference point, again, I am 5'3". And when I started this, I weighed 210 pounds.
Right. Right.
So very obese for
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
frame. And so after I lost about 30 pounds, I got really scared that it would come right back. So now I was down to
Oh.
180, 180, 178, which kind of hovering in that zone. And I knew if I didn't take things to the next level, that eventually I'd fall off and regain it
Yeah.
all back. And that sounded like a nightmare to me because it wasn't that easy, right? Losing
Yeah. Yeah.
weight,
Yeah.
a lot of effort. So I ended up finding a coach that specialized in strength training, resistance training, and macros. And that's when everything changed for me. And that was the first step to becoming a coach myself, to running women's retreats and teaching women this entire lifestyle. And yeah, that's how it found me technically.
Yeah. And by then, you're already well in perimenopause.
Oh yeah.
And what you've said to me is that you actually entered menopause quite young. Um, and so, how did you realize sort of what was going on and what needed to be different as you were in a perimenopause, menopause stage of life?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great question because I have a really funny answer. And the saying ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was in perimenopause until I was in
Right.
menopause. And then I thought that I was pregnant.
Oh,
That's how
okay.
I found out I was in peri and now post menopause.
Yeah.
Because it was so
Yeah.
far away from my mindset. Now, all the symptoms that I experienced between 37 and 42, I was such a goof. Okay. I was so goofy because I was changing so many things in my body. I was resistance training. My strength was exploding. Actually, I was doing 225-pound deadlifts.
Wow.
I was
Wow.
squatting 180 pounds. I was just doing a lot of different things that over time, I
Yeah.
developed the strength. It wasn't instantaneous for anybody listening. But by the time I was 40, 41 years old, I felt amazing. Okay. I was eating enough protein. I was eating 5 times a day. I was counting my macros. I knew exactly what was going into my body. I was lifting weights. I was doing cardio. I was doing yoga. I was doing all of these things and I was paying attention to my sleep. I also had to learn how to set really strong boundaries in my life with
Yes.
people
Yes.
around me so that I could have the time. So I was really kind of awakening in that period of
Yeah.
time. So whenever I would get a hot flash or, some type of perimenopausal symptom, my brain just automatically went to, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Your body is recomping.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
you're burning fat as you just sit here. So I wouldn't connect the dots because I mean, think about how far away from my mind it had to
Yeah.
be when I was in perimenopause that I just wouldn't connect the dots. I had all kinds of weird body odor, hot flashes, mm, crazy anxiety,
Yeah.
all kinds of things were happening. Ovarian cysts, pre-diabetes markers,
Yeah.
hair loss. My eyesight was going. I had become slightly antisocial. I didn't want to socialize. I didn't want to go anywhere. But all of these things I
I
attributed
mean, these are all classic perimenopause symptoms, but I think your story is most fascinating because you went into menopause so young. Officially, biologically, it could even be called early onset,
yes.
ovarian, the very horrible name that they call it, early onset ovarian dysfunction or early onset, but effectively it was early menopause. There's no reason at the age of 40, 41, 42, this would be in your frame of reference. Remember, we're talking 10 years ago before, social media was blowing up with all this perimenopause, menopause information. And I think your story is so important before we even dive into, all the things you learn, because it's a story that is so common but not talked about, of women experiencing perimenopause and menopause earlier than what you expect, and having no recognition and not connecting the dots and not understanding what's going on, and then all of a sudden one day it's like, oh, I haven't had a period for quite a long time. What's going on here?
Yes, absolutely. And over the years, I have actually researched this quite a bit. The
Yeah.
average age, technically, is 37 that women begin seeing symptoms.
Yeah.
So I don't really know the reason. I have some theories on this, but I think that most of us, or a lot of women, obviously are on birth control, right?
Yes.
In this day and
Yes.
age, right? And so I think that, but I'm not a doctor, so this is my hypothesis. Okay. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. But I have thought about this so much that this is and researched it so much. And this is kind of where my head is at now.
Yeah.
I was never on birth control my entire life. And so um, I did notice these things, and it was over much sooner than most
Yeah.
other women. And now, when I meet a lot of women, I talk to a lot of women, I work with a lot of women, I do notice there's a bit of a correlation just from just talking to people, that people that have been on birth control for 20, 30 years, their
Yeah.
symptoms are very different.
Yeah.
And perimenopause lasts much longer for them. So I'm
Yeah.
hearing stories like, 12, 13 years in
Yeah.
perimenopause.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, look, we know I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the oral contraceptive pill, but we've spoken about it a lot on the podcast. I think that women have been given a very big disservice by the medical practitioners,
Hmm.
where the oral contraceptive pill, what we colloquially call the pill, is given out to already from teenagerhood. As you said, girls, women are on it for 30 years, maybe with some breaks for getting pregnant, without any real understanding of what it is that they are doing to their bodies. Now, sometimes the pill is required and is important and is necessary. But for many, many women, they are taking it without realizing they are pumping their bodies full of synthetic hormones. Also, if you're double packing, which so many women do, repeated double packing, what that is doing to your menstrual cycle. And the fact that even if you are having a bleed whilst you're on the pill, it is all synthetic. Your
Right.
regular natural reproductive system is not actually working for all those years you're on the pill. So I'm not saying, throw the pill out, throw it in the garbage, but I'm saying I don't think women are being educated as to what is happening to their bodies whilst they are on the pill for that number of years.
It's technically, it's putting you into a chemically induced menopause, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. Okay, I want to get back to your sort of main things that you talk about, which is building muscle, nutrition, and protein. So, through your own research and your own experiences and your own sort of perimenopause, menopause journey, you realize that this was sort of some of the foundations of what you needed to feel really good. So, talk to me about this whole concept that we're really hearing now about building muscle, strength training, more protein. Why is it so important? And is it specifically and especially during this sort of midlife years, whatever that may be, if you're anywhere from 40 or maybe 37, to 50, 55? And is it maybe even relevant for women in their 20s and 30s? Sort of what's going on here? Why is it important? What have you found and what do you educate about with your women?
Absolutely. So, just to give you a frame of reference, I started this 13 years ago. And so the landscape 13 years ago was very little information on perimenopause, menopause,
Yeah.
HRT, GLP, right? So all of these things were not anywhere in my realm of thought whatsoever.
Yeah.
Everything I have done and I have achieved, it has been done lifestyle and organically. I mean, like I mentioned before, I've never even taken birth control. So
Right.
all of this was done completely without any type of pharmaceutical intervention.
Yeah.
Now, what I found was that lifting weights, resistance training specifically, and I'm going to differentiate resistance training from yoga and from cardio and from walking, right?
Okay.
So they're all different types of modalities that have different types of purposes in
Yeah.
your health journey. Now, resistance training very specifically helps with body recomposition. What that means is your body starts to build lean muscle tissue. When you are in a caloric deficit, meaning you control that with your nutrition, and we can talk about the macros and calories and protein intake and so forth, that is how you reduce body fat. So the combination of the two, being in a slight caloric deficit, reducing body fat, and building muscle mass, is
Mm.
essentially it's like the holy grail of feeling the best that you can feel, especially
Right.
as you're entering perimenopause. Now, why? Because having lean muscle tissue is actually regulatory. It has a regulatory type of function in your body when it comes to your hormones and a lot of other systems in the body, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as we're going through fluctuations during perimenopause, it's very helpful to have a good amount of muscle, to have a really good sleep schedule, to have enough protein and enough fuel in the body so that all the different functions that need to happen during perimenopause, they have enough energy and they have enough fuel to perform. Now,
Yeah.
if you take perimenopause and you kind of put two brackets around it and compare it to other phases of a woman's life, there's two other phases that are very similar to perimenopause, and that is being an adolescent and being pregnant.
Right.
Right. And so if you put those three phases all together in one bucket and you say, okay, how would I treat my teenage daughter or my pregnant self or my teenage self, right?
Yeah.
Would you restrict food from those other two phases?
Yeah.
No, right? Would you only have them sleeping 5 hours a day or a night? Probably not, right?
No.
Would you expect them to be paper thin and, just do endless cardio constantly? They're going to be exhausted, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in perimenopause, but for some reason, we're conditioned to do completely the opposite thing of what our body and our mind and our soul and energy
Yeah.
actually requires. But meanwhile, pregnancy and adolescence are viewed in a different way when they're very similar.
Yeah.
And so
Because what
that's
I'm
what I
hearing you
discovered.
say also is that the years of puberty, adolescence, perimenopause, and pregnancy, from a biological perspective, are hormonally fluctuating times. There's
Yes.
when there is a lot of hormonal imbalance and hormonal unpredictability. And what I'm hearing you say, which I 100% agree with, and is my approach also, is that in that fluctuation, in that imbalance, we want to do all these things to help bring our body back into balance. So there are all these things that we can do to really support our body and create as much consistency, balance, stability from all these extra and maybe external sources, whilst the biology of our body is so unpredictable.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Except that for whatever reason, we're conditioned not to do that for ourselves in midlife, right?
Yeah.
Because midlife
Yeah.
has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And we tend to look at it as, the end of reproductive years. A lot of women may feel grief over that. They may
Yeah.
feel sadness,
Yeah.
anxiety, not really understanding what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so all of these different modalities is what I discovered was one, regulating my nervous system. Okay. Top priority, right? Because without the nervous system being able to regulate, everything else goes down the toilet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Two,
Yeah. Yeah.
my sleep. My sleep
Yeah.
was like right next to the nervous system as far as
Yeah.
priority. So if I did not get enough sleep, if I got less than 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep, the next day was a complete it was a non-factor, right? Didn't have any energy to do anything extra, right? Because I was
Yeah.
already feeling like in perimenopause, you are already feeling anxious and tired and all
Yeah.
these things. And now somebody's asking me, well, you got to go lift weights and you got to do like all
Yeah.
these other things. And it's like, wow, really? No, I
Yeah.
can't. You feel
And
like you
also,
just
it's
can't.
funny because when you talk about sleep and relating it to those sort of adolescent years and the pregnancy years, we all know adolescents sleep hours and hours, maybe not the hours that we would like them to sleep, but they do sleep for hours. We know that a pregnant woman, we say, of course you have to sleep. You're growing a human being in your body. When it comes to perimenopause and menopause, us as those women in that stage of life, we're so busy, running around, with our careers, with our families, with our kids, with aging parents, with our responsibilities. Sleep absolutely is not seen as an important piece of the equation.
It's a badge of honor actually not to
Yes,
sleep, right?
yes,
And
yes.
so the lifestyle that we have all kind of created as a society this day and age in
Yeah,
2026 is not conducive to having any kinds of needs whatsoever
yeah,
in midlife, right? You're labeled as demanding, high maintenance, crazy. Oh, you just get used to that. But
yeah,
that's not really the reality, right? We're
yeah,
just, our needs, literally, our basic human needs are not being met because we have conditioned ourselves to think the opposite is what we need to be doing, right? And
yeah,
so once I started realizing all of these things, once I started realizing that I have to set really hard boundaries with people around me and in terms of how much work I was doing, 19-hour work days were not going to be a thing now,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
and they haven't been for a very long time for me.
yeah,
But they used to be in my 30s and in my 20s,
yeah.
right? I could handle it.
And
But
it
that's
also must have been a very big adjustment for you at the age of 42 when you say that you officially went into menopause. And what was going on with your, contemporaries, what was going on in the world around you to be that young and know that you have now entered this next stage and all this amazing realizations that you are now realizing at quite a young age about boundaries, about sleep, about the need to support yourself, about sort of this that you're now obviously thinking slightly differently. That must have been quite difficult for you to realize, okay, I'm at a very different stage of life to maybe other people around me.
That's such a good question, Jacqueline, because that really turned my entire world upside down. I
Yeah.
was blown away by the fact that my entire life up to that point, I believed the opposite, right? I believe that I'll sleep when I'm dead. I can work,
Yes.
19, 20 hours a day.
Yes.
I pulled all-nighters all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I could go on 1 or 2 days with very little sleep and just keep working through.
Yeah.
Having little kids obviously requires you to not sleep. But I thought, and this is a trauma response, right? If you really
Yeah.
think about it, I thought that working hard and being a hard worker is how I earned my way to having the right to exist. Okay, to
Yeah.
getting approval from people I cared about, family, etc.
Yeah.
I believed that accepting responsibility for other people was my role. It was my
Yep.
duty. It was,
Yep.
what I was put here to do.
Yeah.
And when I stopped, my gosh, so many people show their true colors, number
Yeah.
one. When I was in need, many people became kind of angry and resentful that I
Yes.
now needed time, right? Now I was setting
Yeah.
boundaries and I was saying no. And
Yep.
it was like, well, how could you say no? Sometimes
Yeah.
people might call you crazy in this timeline.
Selfish.
Selfish, crazy, all kinds of things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But something inside of me, I just knew that no, I'm not crazy because if I keep going like this, I am going to
Yeah.
go crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't change something, not only am I going to lose my health, but I'm also going to lose my mental health as well because this is
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
much. It's too much,
Yeah.
right? So I had to put a
Yeah.
lot of boundaries out. Hmm.
Yeah, everything you're saying, I think, is going to really resonate with everyone listening because even though you had all these realizations when you were young, which in a way is a bit of a blessing because you sort of, really stepped into this truth at a younger age, many women only experience this realizations when they get, slightly closer to menopause, which for many women is when they're older. But I think what you're saying really is the essence of this big realization about what menopause is really all about. Um, so it's really fascinating, and I can understand. Firstly, I thank you for sharing this because it's so important, and I can understand why for many people around you they weren't there yet, they weren't at that stage yet, and so they didn't really understand it. Um, I
Yeah, and
just want
I
to,
didn't
yeah,
I didn't have the words to explain it either, right? Like I didn't
exactly,
know why I
exactly,
was feeling this way, right? So why
exactly.
was I so powerfully overwhelmed
Yeah.
with the things I was normally doing, even, let's say 3 years ago, all of a sudden it was massively
Yeah.
heavy on my system. And I
Yeah.
didn't have the words to explain. I just knew what I felt and I trusted my intuition and I just stood my ground. I just knew it deep inside, if I kept going this way, I was
Yeah.
going to get sick,
Yeah.
essentially.
Okay. So you talked about building muscle, why it's so important, how it made you feel. You also talked, I want to focus on the nutrition piece and the protein piece. And you use this word macros. So just tell us what you mean by macros and why protein is so important or such an important piece of this nutrition story.
Yeah. So when it comes to dieting, I don't really use the word dieting. I just use the word
Yeah.
dieting to describe, vegetarian, vegan, etc. So you can be on any type of diet. You could be on a Mediterranean diet, right? Whatever type of diet you prefer. There are micro and macronutrients. So no matter what it is, an apple, for example, it's going to have a certain amount of protein, carbs, fat, fiber, and other minerals and vitamins and micronutrients, right?
Right.
And so what macronutrition does is that it personalizes your diet,
Mm.
whatever that is, gluten-free, whatever it may be, right? To ensure that you're getting the proper nutritional value from the calories that you're consuming, right?
Okay.
So potentially, let's say you're on the McDonald's diet, right? And that's all you eat. Most likely your macros or the nutritional value of a 3 meals per day of McDonald's is going to be the majority fat and carbs with low protein. And
Right.
so the macronutrition does it breaks down the calories that you consume per day into three categories. Technically four, right? Because we want to get about 30 grams of fiber per day in
Yeah.
order to be full, to feel satiety, to be regular with digestion, etc. So we look at how much protein per day, how many carbs, and how much fat. And what I recommend with my clients is, let's say you are curious about, your macro, um, how many macros you're eating per day of what type, right? So what I recommend is that you track the foods that you eat for about 7 days in a macro calculator or a macro tracking app. My
Right.
favorite one is Chronometer. They have one of the best data sets out there. And so you
Okay.
put the food in, and at the end of the day, it's going to tell you you ate 100 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat. And those calories then add up to those macros at the end of the day add up to how many calories you consumed,
Calories.
right?
Okay.
So each gram of protein has 4 calories. Each gram of carb has 4 calories. Each gram of fat has 9 calories. And so the
Right.
app is going to do the math for you. It's going to tell you,
Yeah.
okay, you have consumed 1,800 calories. Now, a very interesting thing that happens when I start working with somebody is, okay, let's say on average, because we want to look at the averages, we don't want to just look at one day.
Yeah.
A lot of times, what I see is that women will have 600 calories on Monday, 1,900 calories on Tuesday, 300 calories on Wednesday, 4,000 calories on Thursday. Very, very inconsistent, right? So we want
Yeah.
to look at the average for the
Right.
week, right? And so let's say we have an average of 1,800 calories. We look to break that down into how much protein, how many carbs, how much fat.
Right.
How do you determine how much protein? Well, you look at the woman's body composition, or, it could be a
Yeah.
man as well. You look at the body composition. Do you
Yeah.
feel, or do they seem to be undernourished, meaning they need to gain weight, overnourished, they have to lose body fat, or they're sufficiently nourished, right? So that's going to determine what the goal is and where you're going to set
Yeah.
the amount of protein you're going to eat. Now, as an example, let's say you are overnourished, you need to drop body fat. Yet, let's say you weigh 200 pounds and your general ideal body weight is at about 150 pounds. That's how much protein you're going to set your macro calculator at. You're going to intake 150 grams of protein because that is your ideal body weight.
Wait.
And that's a one
Yeah.
to one ratio. Now, as we progress in our lifts, as we progress with weight training and our body composition changes and we have more muscle tissue, you could even go all the way up to 1.2 to 1.3 grams of protein per ideal body weight
Yeah.
because your body's going to need more fuel when you're lifting consistently.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the calories really depend on what your goals are, right? So most vegans, for example, will have a higher fat macro number than most pescatarians or
Yeah.
non-vegan, non-vegetarian, non-pescatarian
Yeah.
diets, right? So that depends. You could play around with the fat and the carb ratio. Normally, I like to see it fat at about 45 to 50 grams of fat per day for women our age. That seems to be the ideal. And then the rest of the calories are attributed to the carbs.
Okay. I think what's quite surprising here is the protein number. And I think that so many women don't realize, even on a high protein diet, because we know protein is super important. We know we need to increase our protein as we navigate through perimenopause and menopause and into post. But I don't think women realize how much protein they need and how little protein they're really eating in their diet. Because when you think about 150 grams of protein, like that's quite a lot. And we're just not getting that in our regular diet. The amount of fish or chicken or meat or, whatever you need to eat, eggs, dairy, to come up with that number every single day, it's more than people realize.
Yeah, I mean, what I normally hear, and when I do an audit on most women, 50, 40, 50 years old, when I do an audit on their nutrition, is they're barely getting 60 to 90 grams of protein per day, which
Yeah.
is not even enough for basic bodily functions throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people wonder why they're exhausted, why they're gaining weight. And obviously, we know that the more protein you eat, the more your insulin is balanced. And if you're not eating enough protein, you may have sugar cravings, carb cravings. And then what do you go for? You go for, you're hungry, you're hangry, and all those other, wonderful things. And so you go straight for the, energy burning food because you're tired and you've got low energy and you're feeling, like very, you need to treat yourself after a long day, doing all the things you're doing. And I think that it's such an important thing that we don't realize that protein isn't just about, yes, we need to be eating more protein, but actually it's super important to body functions, to symptom management, and to just feeling really good and strong and energized.
Yeah, so one of the patterns that I notice a lot with the women that I work with is initially it is difficult, right? And so my recommendation is you start where you're at, right? So if you're on average getting 60 to 90 grams of protein per day, that's where you start, but you get that consistently, right? So
Right.
inconsistent number of calories per day, like if you're hopping up and down on your calories on a daily basis, that sends the body into flight or fight, right? So that sends the body and the nervous system into, oh my gosh, is she going to feed us today? Or are we going to have a feast? We're in feast or famine, feast or famine. And that's the opposite of what you want to do during perimenopause. You want to have a really stable, predictable food patterns, okay? And then you want to steadily eat the same amount of protein every single day. So try and get between 60 to 90 for about a week to 2 weeks. Pair that with walking, right? So walk 10,000 steps per day consistently. Your appetite's going to come in. I promise. You're going to be looking for that protein in a week or two. You're going to say, wait a minute, I'm waking up hungry all of a sudden. Because that's the other thing I hear all the time. I'm never hungry. That's another badge of honor, by the way.
Yeah.
We are conditioned that if we don't need any sleep, if we work 16-hour days, and we're not hungry, that somehow there's a biscuit and a medal coming for us, right?
Yeah.
And that's the opposite. Okay. We
Yeah.
don't get a biscuit for not sleeping, working, and never being
Yeah.
hungry.
Or a glass of wine and Netflix.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I don't drink, so to me, it's a biscuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, eating consistently, another thing, right? So first week, you eat at 90 grams a day. You try and get it in. You get your body used to that. Second week, try 100 grams a day. Eat that for a month consistently. Get your 100 grams of protein every single day, 7 days a week for a month. And then add another 10 grams, right? So just incrementally and slowly and progressively add the protein in. Because if you go from eating 50 grams of protein per day to 150 protein grams a day overnight, your body's going to, first of all, you're going to get backed up. right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to go to the bathroom. You're going to feel extremely full, bloated, all kinds of
Yeah.
things, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not there yet. So
Yeah.
slow is the key. Hmm.
Is the key. Okay. So you've mentioned that, you're a number of years in postmenopause and you really haven't, you haven't gone down the HRT route because you haven't needed to. You did all of this stuff without GLP-1 medication before that became, the popular thing for midlife women to do. So tell me, what are your basic principles for naturally supporting yourself during perimenopause and menopause? I also, I always say I am not anti HRT. I don't believe it. There's any cancer health risks for the normative woman to be on HRT, but I don't believe this myth that is being sold to us that every single woman has to be on HRT, because if she's not on HRT, she can't navigate menopause, well, and she's putting herself at risk for bone, brain, and heart health. Like, I think it has to be personal, and there has to be a real reason why you want to go down the HRT route. But I'm not on HRT. I'm 51. I'm well in perimenopause. I feel most days I feel great. I definitely have a few symptoms, but nothing that I don't know how to manage. And I just want women to know it's not that you and I are, unique unicorns and we know some secrets that other people don't know. I think that just there is a way to navigate this without getting so stressed out about symptoms and suffering and struggle, and therefore you need HRT. So what are your basic sort of principles that you're talking about when it comes to navigating this naturally, in a way that really fits with your body?
Great question. So yeah, 13 years ago, there was nobody talked about HRT or GLP. GLP is actually
Right.
like a new thing. 2025, it just exploded. The
It did
skinny talk.
explode.
Yeah, it's a thing now. Skinny
Yeah.
talk. It's so gross. But anyway,
I mean,
um,
we're not going to go down the route of why it exploded and who's pumping money into the fact that this has now become, a very important medication for diabetes has now become the weight loss drug. Let's not go
right.
down that, route of conspiracy theories. But yeah, let's just
Is it though? Is it
let,
a conspiracy? Because when I mapped out cradle to grave in a woman's lifetime,
yeah, yeah,
there is now one period of time where we're not pumped with something, right?
yeah,
So birth control
yeah,
all the way to HRT. There's
yeah,
a reason why you are not good enough. You need
yeah,
these things and everybody needs them. And then that's the message that's out there. Everybody needs them.
yeah.
There's a lot of people that do need them legitimately. They really
Yes,
do need them,
yeah,
right? But the messaging is that, well, if you're not on it, you're missing out. If you're not looking at all these things, and something's
yeah,
wrong with you, like everybody should be on it. Meanwhile, there are people that are on these things that haven't tried some of the most basic things we just talked about, which are basic human needs. Okay, we're being robbed of our basic human needs, and then they're
yeah,
being replaced with this pill or shot or whatever, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, so the things that I do naturally is I keep my body fat down, right? So, my body composition, I pay attention to that on a daily basis. I don't ever want to all of a sudden go unconscious, gain 80 pounds again, and find myself back in that place, right? So, it's a
right,
daily, conscious, intentional choice that I make every single day to live in alignment with my health, and not just physical,
right,
but also mental health,
yeah,
right? And not outsource my health and my decision making to
yeah,
other people, not allow other people
yeah,
to enter my energetic boundaries that I don't feel is beneficial to me.
yeah,
And the things that are my priorities, I make sure I take care of that. And what are my priorities to naturally age? Muscle mass, right?
yeah,
Very, very, very important for muscle mass. So resistance training, keeping body fat down, right? making sure you get enough steps in, doing a little bit of cardio. That's another myth now on social media. Cardio is so bad for you. Oh, don't do any cardio. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Come on,
No, you've got to get that heart pumping. If you don't get that heart pumping, it's yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be super intense, running on the treadmill for an hour or, running a marathon every day. It just needs to be something that gets your heart rate up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you want a good metric, you can take your max age heart rate, right? So 220 minus your age would be your max HR, your max heart rate. And
Mm-hmm.
60% of that is great cardio for you,
Yeah.
right? So if I do the math, let's do that right now. Let's do this live. 220 minus 50. So my maximum heart rate is 170. If I wanted to do 15 minutes of cardio at 60% of my max HR, that's 102, right?
Yeah.
It's 102 heart rate, which is like it's like a brisk
Doable.
walk uphill. Okay,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult to do. You don't have to do
Yeah.
hits. You don't have to run. You don't have, like you said, But a lot of people really, I think, misconstrue the messaging that's out there on social
Yeah.
media. And so when
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, that cardio is so bad," it depends what kind of cardio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. I get a lot of steps in throughout the day, very consciously, very intentionally. I'm actually right now, as I'm talking to you, I am on a treadmill. Okay. I am sitting on a treadmill. I have a little stool. I put it on top of my treadmill. And that's where I do my work because every
Right.
few minutes, every 30, 40 minutes, I'll get up and I'll walk
And
and
just
I'll
take a
continue
walk.
working. Right.
Right.
And then I teach yoga every Wednesday. I teach yoga at the retreats. So that keeps
Yeah.
my mobility in
Yeah.
check. That keeps my stability in check. It
Yeah.
regulates my nervous system, breath work, meditation. If all things sleep, we talked about sleep,
Yeah.
enough protein, right? So I'm not malnourished. I feel good throughout the day. I
Yeah.
get consistent meals every 3 hours. I eat 5 times a day. Little meals, but I eat 5 times a day to keep my blood
Yeah.
sugar regulated, insulin levels on point,
Yeah.
etc. And I never get super hungry where then I go and I have a big meal that I can't
Yeah.
digest at the end of the day and then I go to sleep. So,
Yeah.
think about what happens to those calories that, you ate at the very end of the day after not eating anything all day.
Right.
You have
Right.
2,000 calorie dinner and then you go to bed.
Yeah.
Where does
Yeah.
that energy go?
Yeah. And then you wonder why you've got insomnia, why you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, why you may have night sweats, why you wake up exhausted. It's like
Right.
you didn't eat all day because you were rushing around and maybe you grabbed an energy bar or maybe you grabbed an apple. If you're really good, maybe you grabbed some nuts. Then you come to the end of the day, you sit, you eat all this food because you're starving, hungry, and, probably not high protein food. And then you're wondering, like, why all these things are happening between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. And then you sort of wake up exhausted, have to have your coffee with your muffin to start the day again. And you're like, you know, I just feel terrible. Well,
Right.
it's not rocket science.
No, but back in the day, it was to me.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was the hardest thing
yeah,
I had to figure out. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think rocket science would have been easier for me.
Yes, 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 you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Um,
that's the kicker, like we are
yeah,
so smart, we're so
yeah,
resourceful, we're so hardworking, we're intelligent, we're funny, we're caring, we carry the load for the whole family, and then we can't figure this out for
yeah,
ourselves, and that's
yeah,
where I was at. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I know we sort of you haven't spoken about this at all, and I just want to ask you, does supplements play a role in any of this? Are there certain supplements that you think because of the nutritional piece, the macros and the micros, and we're not really getting in? Also, as we age, our body it's harder to absorb. Even if we're eating really good food, it's harder for our body to absorb all the nutrients. Do supplements play a role for you in your work at all?
So this is my philosophy on supplements. there are only three supplements that I recommend.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And what are they? Creatine, collagen,
Mm.
and a tiny little bit of protein powder to supplement, let's say, a yogurt parfait that, you're trying to hit, let's say,
Yeah.
30 grams of protein, and you're not going to be able to stay within your carbs and fat if you don't add a little protein, but no more than one serving of synthetic food per day. So 30 grams of protein powder is one serving. So that's all you get the whole day. So wherever
Right.
you need to sprinkle it, you sprinkle it. Protein bars, same thing. Uh, That's for emergency food. Okay. If you're
Right.
stuck on the side of the road and you can't get any food for 12 hours, have a protein bar. That's where I'm at. But as far as
And tell me about the creatine and the collagen. Why are those your go-to?
So creatine actually delivers energy to the muscle cells, right? So creatine,
Mm.
3 to 5 grams of creatine per day consistently is fantastic for women. It's one of the most researched supplements out there on the market in general. A lot of historical data to back up that creatine is really good, especially for also brain health, brain fog, energy boost to the muscle cells. It gives you a really nice kick when you go and get your training in, and it's safe, right? And so, I highly recommend that for all women, even 3 to 5 grams. You could start at two, even, right? Even a lower dose is still
Okay.
better than nothing. Collagen works for some people. It does not work for other people. It's
Yeah.
very bio individual. Collagen works for me personally. I had a lot of hair loss when I started
Hmm.
perimenopause. And now it has slowed down. I mean, yeah, I still have hair loss, but it's not anywhere near where I thought it was going to be 13. If I was on the same trajectory I was at
Yeah.
13 years ago. And so I like collagen. It works well for my skin, my nails, hair,
Okay.
etc.
Cool.
So those are the three supplements. Now, do I make any recommendations for any other supplements? I do not, unless your blood work shows
Right.
that you require them. Now, something that I do proactively kind of look to make sure we get enough of is magnesium, right?
Yep.
We're highly deficient in magnesium in general
Yeah.
as a human species. Potassium is another one, and
Hmm.
sodium, right? So sodium has been extremely demonized,
Yeah.
in the few decades,
Yeah.
when in fact it's sugar that should be demonized. And potassium and magnesium we're just generally deficient in that. And if you don't get enough magnesium, you're not going to sleep well. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
go to the bathroom as often. And there's many different types of magnesium. So you can do
Yeah.
your research on what type of magnesium is the right one for you.
Okay.
But those are, as a blanket statement, that's what I would say. Now, unless your blood work shows that you're deficient in iron or something else, then, that's up to your doctor. So you shouldn't be really taking advice from some random influencer that you need to take this, burbine or whatever
Yeah.
supplement when you have no idea if you need it or
I
not.
know one of my clients actually just wrote to me yesterday and said, I was searching on the internet and this supplement came up. I've been in the menopause space a long time. I'd never heard of this thing. And she was like, people say I should take it. It's like a sugar balancer, something or other. I'm not going to mention what it is because I don't want women to start, Googling this thing. But I was like, I've never heard of this thing. It's never come up in any of the research or any of the people, the functional medicine people that I follow, any of the real health people that I value and appreciate. This supplement has never ever come up for me. So yeah, maybe it works for some people and maybe it's going to be beneficial, but it's not in my, I actually recommend sort of 5 essential supplements and that's it. Like you can spend money on whatever you want to spend it on, but I think we have to be realistic about what does your body actually need and what is like a nice added bonus, and for you may be really important, but it's not part of the like essential things that women at this stage of life really really need, unless, as you said, there is blood work to support it or a specific symptom to support it.
You know what I do love? CBD.
Go on.
CBD. Yeah. So I do recommend, it depends, right? It's a case by case
Yeah.
basis. But if you are having anxiety
Yeah.
and you can't sleep well, there's a really great options out there. CBN is what I prefer for sleep, not necessarily CBD, because it helps you, calms you down and helps you relax. Now, if you have, let's say, an anxiety flare up, meaning like there are people out there that have just general baseline anxiety all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
but then sometimes they'll have a flare up. So it's kind of like, I'm not going to compare the two, but let's say you have Crohn's, you can be in maintenance with Crohn's and then have a flare up. So
Yeah.
anxiety is kind of similar. I noticed that with a lot of us is that we can go in episodes of flare ups, and that's
Yeah.
where CBD works, CBN, CBD, CBG, even sometimes THC as well, helps calm the nervous system down,
Right.
and it calms you down enough where you get sleep, which is how you kind of get out of that, potentially out of
Yeah.
that anxiety flare up.
Yeah. Okay, we've talked about so many things, and really so much of what you're sharing has come from your own lived experience. So I'm so grateful for you to have shared so much. Um, and I know we've talked a lot about sort of the perceptions of menopause and how women sort of are experiencing this. Um, before I ask you my last closing question, which I ask everyone, I just want to ask you, I guess, sort of the big, overarching thing about what is this one secret or one thing about menopause and this stage of life that you really want everyone to know. You've been through your own really fascinating journey. So, what is this sort of one secret around menopause that you really want to share with everyone?
Oh my gosh, there's so many secrets. One secret about menopause, it's such a great time in our
Yeah,
lives.
yeah, yeah.
It really is. And I feel like that message is not really heard that often.
Agreed.
And we're just focusing on the negative aspects and, the
Yeah,
symptoms and the
yeah,
discomfort of it. But once you kind of understand how things are going and what you need to do in order to feel better, my gosh. I mean,
yeah.
you couldn't pay me enough right now to go back to being in PMS mode or getting
Right.
my period or even being pregnant or any of that. I don't miss it one bit. I've been completely
Yeah,
menopausal for 7 years now. Oh my gosh, it's freedom.
yeah.
It's great. Okay. And I joke around all the time. I'm like, so this is what men must feel like. Like really, I've missed out
Yeah,
on this all this time
yeah,
because, there's no fluctuation, there's no PMS, there's no like, mood swings throughout the day, throughout the month. Every week is different. Your
yeah,
energy is really stable, your energy is balanced. There's little tweaks here and there that you can do to help yourself, have more
yeah,
energy and things like that. But overall, my gosh, it's so much better. I have so much respect for us as women now
yeah,
that I'm on the other side of this because holy hell, it's hard to be a woman.
yeah. I think what you're talking about is so important because I call it fear-based menopause conversation. And that's sort of where we are a little bit with the menopause conversation today. It's fear-based, it's symptom focused, it's going to be awful, pain and suffering and struggle and all this sort of
Right.
terrible stuff. And the only way to survive it is with HRT.
Right.
And we're not talking enough about what is the meaning and purpose of that stage, and then what happens in postmenopause. And I love what you're sharing because that is really the message that we need to get out there. So I'm really grateful that you're sharing it here and sharing it, with all the work you're doing.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so grateful to chat with you today.
Yeah.
And yeah, I that's my whole thing. I want to spread this message. You are on just on the other side of freedom, and you can
Yeah.
get there, and you're gonna love it. You're
Yeah.
going to love it. Okay,
Yeah.
come join us.
So, the question I ask all my guests as we end our conversation is this podcast is called The Things I Want My Daughters to Know. What do you want your daughters, either your real biological daughters or your figurative daughters, your goddaughters, your nieces, that next generation of women coming up? What is that one message that you really want to share with them?
I want my daughter to know that she does not have to earn her love.
Mm,
She is perfect just being alive, being here. There is no mission in this realm aside from becoming an awakened and a intentional human being and growing our internal muscle, right? Internally, that's our goal. That's our purpose. I feel like in this world
yeah,
is not to earn money. It's not to earn love. It's not to, be something external. It's really to develop a really strong internal sense of identity and who we are and what we're here to do, what our purpose is, and our purpose is to grow.
yeah. So funny. So many of my guests say this about you are enough as you are love, you have self worth, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. I find it, and I say this every time one of my guests says this type of message because this message is really echoed from so many different guests that I've had on the podcast. And I just, I've said this before, I wish we could pass this message to our daughters in our breast milk because
Mhm.
somehow it's really missing this,
Yes.
this, for 101 different reasons, our next generation of girls still feel they need to prove themselves. They still feel they need to earn self worth and self love. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that message. And it's a message that is really coming to me so much from so many guests.
I'm so happy to hear that because we need to hear it. We need to hear it and we need to repeat it over and over to ourselves, to our children, to our sons,
Yeah.
to our daughters, to everybody, right? To
Yeah.
yeah, over and over and over again because it gets lost. We get lost
Yeah.
sometimes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Terry, this has been really powerful, very, very meaningful, with a lot of practical strategies thrown in also. Tell everyone where they can find you, where you're hanging out online, where you're sort of sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, so you can come find me on Instagram. My handle is How Good Can It Get? And you can find me on thehouseofrose.com. That's my website. We have tons of retreats coming up in
Yeah.
2026, as well as 2 new cookbooks. So check it out. And yeah, if you guys, anybody who has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everyone, as you can hear, Terry knows what she's talking about. She's been through it herself and she was doing it before it was trendy and hip and everyone was talking about it. So she really is one of the OGs in this area. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. Everyone who's listening, thank you so much for joining us today. Like, review, subscribe, follow, and most importantly, share with your daughters, with your friends, with the important women in your life. And I look forward to seeing you at another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jacqueline. It was my pleasure.